Croeso I gynhadledd Argo Navis, dilyn y sêr. This is the second day of the Argo Navis Follow the Stars conference, and we've got stars up in the sky and we've got stars on the ground as well, and we've had some great speakers over the last 2 days really, and it continues with the presence of Allan Trow from Dark Sky Wales, and he will be talking about the virtual planetarium. Allan is a director of Dark Sky Wales, and Dark Sky Wales provide bespoke astronomy experiences for individuals and companies, and as one who has attended his sessions, it's wonderful to be there. It's so well organized, and everybody gets a chance to discover the night sky, on the condition, of course, that it's a clear sky. And we are always looking for new places in the Cambria Mountains of Wales for Dark Sky Wales to come and bring their telescopes and also bring their experience and their knowledge and their inspiration and aspiration for dark skies here in Wales. So Allan, thanks a lot for your inspiration over the last 4.5 years, in terms of that being a message from me personally, but also a message from many of the Cambria Mountains businesses who have got to know you. And long may that continue into 2022, that we can ensure that the Cambria Mountains dark sky story continues for another year and another year and another year. In fact, for a few light years, if I may say that.
Well, actually, Dad, you've got that slightly wrong.
Allan. Croeso.
You got that slightly wrong there, Dav, because a light year is not a measurement of time.
Well, it is in Tregaron, okay? Because sometimes that's the amount of time you're going to wait for a pint in a pub.
It's a measurement of distance. But thanks for the introduction, and thanks to Argo Navis for allowing me to present today. The project itself is quite an encapsulating one, taking in most of Northern Europe, I believe. So I'm going to just share a little bit of my screen with you at the moment. So we've got the planetarium nice and visible there, and hopefully you can all see that. Now what I'm going to do over the next 35-40 minutes is take you around the night sky as it would appear here in the Northern Hemisphere over the next couple of weeks. Now, to begin with, we're going to start just as the sun is setting, and when we look towards the south at this particular time, we get to see kind of a nice little view, really. Now, when the moon is out of the way and we've got no natural light pollution in front of us, and you're in a dark area, you'll be able to spot the remnants of what looks like a cloud. But this is, in fact, is the Milky Way galaxy. It's quite an easy thing to spot if you're looking and actually concentrating on the surrounding area. Now, it's more prominent when it gets darker, but even during that kind of twilighty phase, you'll start to pick up some of the brighter areas of it. And these will then just get brighter as the evening progresses. But also, you'll be able to spot quite a bright object down towards the southwest here, and another just off towards the southeast. Now, these are the two brightest planets that we have in our solar system, and 5 of the classic planets that we can see from Earth. Now, this one here is the planet Venus, or our sister planet, as it's sometimes referred to. Now, Venus is known as our sister planet generally because it's roughly the same size as Earth, and is very similar in orbital dynamics around the sun. So we've got very similar conditions, temperature-wise. Orbits a little bit different, with Venus going around quicker than the Earth, but basically very much the same. But really, that's where those similarities end, because Venus itself is a planet where things have gone slightly awry. Instead of having this lovely temperate planetary temperatures that we have here on Earth, it's actually a bit of a hellhole. The surface temperatures on Venus are in excess of 400 degrees centigrade. It's an extremely hot planet. And that's all due to one thing, essentially global warming. The whole planet is surrounded in a very dense atmosphere made mainly from carbon dioxide. So the sunlight which is beating down on the surface of the planet during the day is becoming trapped and heating that planet up. And unlike the Earth, where a lot of the energy then escapes back into space during the nighttime facing period, Venus doesn't. That carbon dioxide acts like a duvet and traps that heat and has constantly raised the temperature there. Jupiter is different. This is a gas giant, and it's a lot more distant than our planet Earth. It's at a distance known as 5 astronomical units. And an astronomical unit is just the distance measured between the Earth and the Sun, or the average distance between the Earth and the Sun. Now, this is 5 times that distance. So it's 5 times 93.5 million miles, or 150 million kilometers. So it's at a good distance, but it's large. And its gaseous surface actually reflects quite a bit of light back towards us. And this is why it appears bright in the sky. Now, in between the two of them, we have probably the best planet, in my opinion, of them all. And this is Saturn. Now, Saturn is an actual gem to look at in a telescope. And when we move the sky on a little bit, we're going to have a little closer look at these two planets in more detail. But as we kind of draw a line between Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter, this line is known as the ecliptic. And it's the apparent path that the sun takes through the sky, and the planets themselves will always be found either on or slightly above or below this ecliptic line. And it's quite an important line because you also find the constellations of the zodiac along the ecliptic. And the zodiacal constellations are those constellations that were first devised by the Sumerians and then the Babylonians and brought through to modern history through the Greek telling of the tales in the sky. But they are quite easy to spot, some of them. And in particular, we have one here, a constellation called Sagittarius, that when we zoom into it a little bit, we have what is known as an asterism contained within it. Now, an asterism is just a pattern of stars which is recognizable in its own right, but is part of one or more constellations. And this one just happens to be part of the one constellation of Sagittarius. And when you look at it, you can actually tell what it's going to be called. It's known as the teapot, because here is the handle of the teapot, there is the body, here is the lid, and that is the spout. And if you can imagine, you've got a cup of hot tea brewing in here, then you've got the steam coming out of the spout, which is then the Milky Way above. Now, it's quite an easy way of remembering where the Milky Way is, but this is a setting scene. Now, over the next couple of weeks, this is going to disappear below the horizon. And if we move it on an hour in the sky here, you can see how that has begun to dip already. So the teapot is being poured. But if we just go back out slightly for a moment, when these stars of the teapot and the planets there start to emerge, we also have another asterism, which is literally above your head. And that point directly above your head is known as the zenith. Now, the opposite of the zenith, so a line drawn through your head, down through your feet and through the center of the earth and come out the other side, is known as the nadir. So the nadir is the opposite of the zenith. But at the zenith, we have the constellation here of Cygnus, the swan. And you can see how the wings of the swan extend out here. This star here is a star known as Deneb, which is the tail. And then we have the body coming down to the head and ending at this star here, known as Albiero. Now, Deneb and the star to the right of it called Vega, and the one at the base of it here called Altair, form this asterism. And because we've got 3 stars there, there's not many shapes that we can make with 3 points. So we call it the summer triangle. And the summer triangle is made up from the 3 stars of the constellation of Deneb, Lyra, and Altair. And you can see quite clearly here that this is also the shape of a bird flying, and it represents the eagle of Aquila. Now, Aquila is a fantastic constellation to see, but unfortunately it's not around for long at the moment, dipping below or starting to dip below the horizon about an hour after darkness. Now in Lyra, we have probably one of the nicest little objects you can see with your own eye. Now it's a difficult one to spot initially, but if you look at the shape of Lyra, with Vega off to the side here, we have this wonderful parallelogram shape. Now, in between the 2 stars at the bottom, we actually have a nebula. And there, you can just see it emerging. This is known as the Ring Nebula. It's got a name or catalog entry number of M57. Now, M in this instance stands for Messier, and it's a catalog that was put together by a gentleman called Charles Messier. And this is a lovely little target to go for if you've got a small telescope. It's difficult to see with binoculars, but a small telescope will show you the detail that this ring possesses. Unfortunately, your eyes don't work that well in the dark, so you're not going to see the colors. But what you will see, or in the appearance to see, will be the resemblance of a polo mint shape. So that nice kind of round circle. And it kind of is a whitey object with a slightly greeny grey tinge. And it's easier seen when you don't look directly at it. You use something called averted vision. So instead of looking directly at the object in the middle, you'd look off to one side or up or above or down below. And then out of the corner of your eye, this will pop into view. And it's what's left over from the death of a sun-like star. This is known as a planetary nebula. And we have a number of different types of nebula, which range from emission nebulas, reflection nebulas, and dark nebulas. And we'll have a look at those in a little bit more detail as we go through the talk. But planetary nebulas are a little bit of a naughty one, really, in that list, because they are not really anything to do with planets. The name planetary nebula actually comes from William Herschel, who historically was one of the first people to discover these objects when he was putting together his new general catalogue, or NGC catalogue. And as he was observing these, he noticed that they looked a little bit like planets, the gassy planets. And this is why the name has stuck. So they're known as planetary nebulae for that reason. But if we move out of Lyra and we move back up a little bit towards Cygnus, I'm going to put Cygnus on its side here at the moment so you can actually see the bird in flight. Again, there's the wings, the tail going down through the body. Now, when we go back to the star here, Albiero, we'll check it now. There we go. If we look at this again in a small pair of binoculars, it's actually a double star. And you get a lovely discrepancy of colors in this one, where one is a sapphire kind of blue and the other is a golden in appearance. And this just highlights the different colors of stars that you can find in the night sky. Now, the stars themselves vary in colors from blue whites all the way down to reds. And the color is actually just a function of the temperature at the surface of the star. And our sun is a yellow star, which is kind of smack bang in the middle of that color range, with the blue white stars being the bigger, hotter stars and the red stars being cooler stars. And I wouldn't say small, because we can get red giant stars, and we'll actually see one of those in a moment. Now, those stars will be out and visible even in the twilight sky. But as we move forward and we get a bit of darkness, then a good starting point for any kind of observer is a familiar pattern that you can find in the north. And even though I'm an experienced astronomer now, an observer, I always go back to this particular pattern because it's so important in finding certain things. And this pattern is here. Now, this is another asterism, these 7 stars here. These are known as the Plough, the Big Dipper, or more commonly in Wales, in South Wales in particular, these are known as the saucepan. Now, the saucepan is an easy thing to remember because, let's be honest, there's the bowl of the saucepan and there's the handle. And you can use this little bit to find the numerous objects in the sky. By coming to the end of the bowl, we can draw a line between the 2 stars, keep that line going up, and we end up here. And this is the North Star Polaris. And once you've found Polaris, you can trace out a constellation this time. And this one is the Little Dipper, or Ursa Minor, the Little Bear. If we go back to the handle of the saucepan and we draw a line through these, then by drawing that line and curving the arc around, we end up at this star. And this star is a star known as Arcturus. And Arcturus is at the base of this rather large kite in the sky, or sometimes referred to as an ice cream cone, which represents the constellation of Bootes. Now, in between Bootes and the saucepan, we have this little line. Now, this little line doesn't look like much, but this is the constellation of Canis Venatici. And these are 2 dogs, which are the companions of Arcturus, Bootes, as he is marching this part of the sky around. And when we look at this star and we think about the name Arcturus, well, that name translates to guardian of the bear, because he is guarding the bears here. And when we go back to the saucepan, the whole constellation that it joins onto, which includes this triangle here, this leg coming down, 2 rear legs and a body, is the Great Bear Ursa Major. So we have these 2 easy bears to find, and now we found Bootes. Now, you can also find other constellations quite easily now that you recognized those patterns. One of the first ones to actually look at is very simple to find by using that line that we already drew up to the North Star Polaris, but actually stopping about 1/3 of the way up and just moving slightly left, you find this bright star. Then you can just trace out this kind of windy S shape around the sky, and you'll find the dragon Draco. Now, it looks more like a snake because in the original interpretations of Draco, this was a serpent known as Ladon, and it actually lies just facing one of his conquerors, and this is Hercules. Now, Hercules has 4 stars here in the center making up his body. They are known as the keystones, and Hercules' arms are facing off in this direction and his legs here, but he's minus a head, so it's a very difficult one to make out sometimes. But then sandwiched in between Hercules and Bootes, we have this wonderful group of stars here known as Corona Borealis, or the Northern Crown. Now, you can see we've got a few questions here at the moment, so we'll have a little look at those. Right, Paul's asking about the Ring Nebula changing shape over 5 to 10 years. Well, Paul, the Ring Nebula is actually an expanding object. And when you look at it over that period, to the naked eye, it's not going to change much in appearance. It's a very long process, the death of a small star. Right, Salios is asking about the Ursa Major asterism in Wales, in the Welsh language. Unfortunately, it doesn't have any Welsh translation really, Salios, because this part of the sky is all really linked together by a character known as Serbaline, who we believe it's Serbaline because the person was never really named. And essentially, when you look at Draco here, this is a stirrup, and this becomes a horse. Sorry, this is the stirrup, and this is the stirrup becomes part of a horse, which is being ridden around the night sky. And as Beracynthia, I can't remember her name, Beracynthia then is riding this horse, she actually is checking on people to see if they've died. And if they've died, she will take them off to the underworld. But to find out if they're alive at this point, she was relying on her eyesight, watching them breathing. But as her eyesight got worse as she aged, she couldn't tell the difference. So what she did was touch them. And unfortunately, her touch was the kiss of death. So they would die anyway. So the rulers of the underworld were getting a bit concerned that she was bringing so many bodies to them on a nightly basis. And they asked her why. So she explained what was going on. And they said, this is unacceptable. You have to find a different way. So Beracynthia came up with the idea of using her horse. If her horse breathed on a person and they reacted, then she knew they were alive and she wouldn't take them off to the underworld. But if they didn't, then obviously they were dead. Now, the horse she was riding was female. So it was a mare. So if you've been visited by the nightmare, then you were disturbed and you were asleep. And this is where the origins of the term nightmare originated from. So I hope that answers that question for you. Right, Paul, the Welsh word for plough, I'm not sure of, so I'd have to ask David on that because unfortunately I'm not a Welsh speaker and we leave that one till the end there for David, unless he wants to jump in on it.
It's Argo.
There you go.
Or pladir. Pladir.
Great.
It's
Thank you, David.
two words. One normally he was in North Wales and one normally he was in South Wales.
What if you're in the middle?
The land is not good enough for ploughing.
Thanks, Dav.
That's why we have
Cheap.
We have milk here.
But going back to Hercules here, Hercules is actually linked directly to the Milky Way as well. Now, when you think of the Milky Way, the term milk, where did it come from? Well, really, it comes from Greek mythology and the fact that Hercules is the father of, Zeus is the father of Hercules. Now, Zeus was a bit of a character and had some philandering ways, and he got one of his maids pregnant. Now, she couldn't cope with the child because he was a demigod. He was very strong and individual. And he also had Hera, who was Zeus's wife, really hell-bent on killing the child. So she sent snakes, for instance, to try to murder him. But Hercules, being the strongest baby, killed these snakes and actually just fell asleep on their bodies. When his mother discovered him, she was distraught and took Hercules to Olympus, where Zeus was having the festival, and handed the child to him and left. Now, Zeus had no interest in raising the child, so he gave him to his servants to get rid of, and he threw him into a river. Now, unbeknown to Hera and her daughter Aphrodite, as they were walking through the party, they heard this child cry. They heard a child crying, not knowing that it was Hercules. So off they went to rescue the child, and they brought him back in out of the water, and he wouldn't shut up. He was crying continuously. So Aphrodite pleaded with her mother to feed the child, so she placed him to her breast, And as he started to suckle, she realized that he was Hercules, that strong baby that she'd been trying to kill. And she pulled him away from her breast. And as she did so, the milk spilled across the heavens, forming the Milky Way that we have in the sky today. But in reality, that Milky Way is the light coming to us from around about 300 billion stars in our own galaxy. These stars are just so distant to us that we don't see them as individual stars. We see them instead as this cloud of light. But there are some wonderful things contained within the Milky Way, and that includes everything that you are looking at in this picture. Now, if I had moved the sky around slightly, then I couldn't make the same statement, because here we have a number of different constellations that can actually be followed on from the plough. So there's the pointers there, pointing to the North Star. If you keep on going, you'll encounter this constellation, which is known as Cepheus. So there's the top of a house, and here is the main structure. So it looks a little bit like a child's drawing of a house, which represents Cepheus, the king of Ethiopia. Below him in the sky, we have this wonderful W shape, which is Cassiopeia, his wife and mother of his child, Andromeda, who just sits in here. Now, Andromeda is like a capital letter A on its side, but this capital letter A is actually joined to this rather large object in the sky. This is known as Pegasus, and these four stars are the square of Pegasus. And actually, if you were to put your hand outright and place it in the square in the night sky, then those four stars will remain visible. And it's one of the only squares in the night sky that is able to do that for you. So this becomes his body. There are his two legs. Here is his neck and his head. But Andromeda has a lovely little secret hidden within it. And if you come to these middle two stars here, and you draw a line between them, and then just go up roughly the same distance, then you find the most distant object you can see with your own eyes. And here it is. Now, I'm not going to zoom in too much at the moment, because if you're in a dark area, like most of Wales, then you're going to be able to spot this quite clearly as this misty patch. And like I mentioned earlier about averted vision with a ring nebula, where you can just look slightly away and it pops into view, then the same thing happens here. When you look directly at it, it can be seen, but if you look away from it, it really starts to dominate your eye. And if you've got a pair of binoculars, it comes to be a little bit more of a better view. But obviously, a small telescope will give you something reminiscent to this. And I'll show you a picture of the Andromeda galaxy before we finish that was taken by one of our guests not that long ago. But this is a wonderful object to go and find, because it is very, very easy to see and locate. And once you've found it, you never forget where it is. And it's well worth going out and having a look at. But it's not the only galaxy in that picture, because when we go back to those two stars and we go down a little bit, roughly the same distance, you'll find another one. Now, this one is called M33. So another one of those Messier catalog entries. And this is a lovely spiral galaxy. And it's actually a barred spiral when you look at it. So it's got this little bar to its nucleus and the spirals coming off it. But it's a lot fainter than Andromeda. And this is roughly 3.2 million light years away from us, whereas Andromeda is around about 2.5 million light years. So it's a very interesting part of the sky, and somewhere where we can find other galaxies quite easily. But it does bring us to a kind of a legend here again, because when you look at Cassiopeia here, Cepheus, Pegasus, Andromeda, and here we have Perseus. And just below on the horizon here, we have Cetus as well. And all these are linked in a mythology that you're probably all familiar with, but may not recognize. But if you've watched a Hollywood film called The Clash of the Titans, and there's actually been 2 of them, then that whole story is played out here with Andromeda being rescued by Perseus after her mother, Cassiopeia, was so vain that she told anybody that would listen that she was the most beautiful woman in the entire world. Her father consulted with 3 wise witches or oracles who could see into the future, who told him that they had to sacrifice their only daughter in order for them to save the lands of Ethiopia over which they reigned. Now, when you look at the mythical figures, you can see them quite clearly. So there's Andromeda chained. You see the chains there, chained to a sea cliff with Pegasus right next to her. Perseus, after he defeated the Gorgon Medusa, returning here. There's Cassiopeia with a mirror in her hand, very reminiscent there of Cinderella. And there is her wise father. And below we have the Kraken or Cetus just on the horizon. So it's a very interesting part of the sky, and all this plays out in a relatively early evening at the moment. But as you progress through a few hours, then the one character who really starts to dominate the sky is our winter favorite, and that is the constellation of Orion. And if you look at Orion's arm, you can see he's got a club extended here. And if you follow that club up, you can see the arc of the Milky Way. So instead of this quite dominant feature that we saw earlier on, where we were looking towards the core or the center of our galaxy, we are now moving out towards this outer region or a spiral arm, whereby it becomes much, much thinner in appearance in the sky. But that doesn't mean it's not interesting, because contained within the Milky Way here, we have some phenomenal objects. I'm just going to get rid of those drawings in it, because when we start looking in here, for instance, right in the constellation of Monoceros, which is just to the left of Orion, we have the Rosette Nebula. Now, finding this is quite difficult, actually, but finding the star cluster within it is relatively easy. Now, from a dark location, you'll be able to find the star cluster, and with a telescope around about 8 inches in diameter, you'll be able to start to see the nebulosity as well. Now, I'm quite fortunate. We've got dark skies right on our doorstep. And even during the lockdown period, I could go out and exercise and see this. And my grandson was staying with me at the time, and he actually captured a picture of this, which was truly outstanding. And I'm going to show you that in a few moments. But the real star of the show is Orion. And if you look at Orion here quite carefully, you can see that there's nebulosity, there's nebulosity all around the entire constellation. And this is known as the Orion molecular cloud. Now, the molecular part comes from the presence of molecular hydrogen, and that is a star-forming material. So when we look into the heart of Orion here, so in Orion's belt, for instance, we can see that we have star-forming regions. This is known as the Great Nebula of Orion, and it's got a Messier catalog designation of M42 and M43. You've also got here the iconic Horsehead Nebula and Flame Nebula right next to the star Allan. Now, these are easy targets for a large telescope here, but this can be seen with the naked eye, and a pair of binoculars will reveal the nebulosity in all its glory. But obviously, with a telescope, you get to see more detail, but sometimes you miss a few things, because like I mentioned, the whole complex here is a wonderful photographic opportunity for those interested in astrophotography, because if you can do a long exposure image of this area, you bring out all these gases, you bring out all the red areas, you bring out all the reflection nebulas, and it becomes a truly wonderful thing to see. But it's also a bit of a guide in the sky. Now, when you look at Orion's belt here, or the stars of Allan, Allan, and Menter, you can use them as a guide to go up. And as you go up, you pass through the constellation of Taurus and this little star cluster here known as the Hyades, and it includes the star Aldebaran. And then all the way up until you get to this little group here. Now, this little group to the Japanese is known as Subaru. Now, the word Subaru means turtle, and you can see the shell of the turtle there with its head sticking out. Now, we know them as the Pleiades or the Seven Sisters, and there's a lot of pubs and clubs in Wales actually named Seven Sisters. It's strange. Also got a lot of ploughs as well. But it's well worth having a little look at that and actually testing your eyesight to see how many you can count as it rises in the sky. But if we take the sky back just a little bit, you'll notice that the Seven Sisters, just here, over towards the northeast, are rising just as the sun is setting over in the west. Now, to the Egyptians, that was quite important, because the Egyptians knew that if the cluster or asterism was rising as the sun was setting, then we were moving into our autumn winter period and they needed to harvest their crops. But when it appeared in the evening sky just after sunset, so as the sun was going down, so were the Seven Sisters, then that was the time to go and plant. So he was moving into the summer months. So you can see the sky is a wonderful place, full of stories, full of objects that you can observe, but also a very good calendar, and one that saw our fledgling humanity really several thousand years ago move from hunter-gatherers to becoming more of an agrarian or farming society, because we were using the sky to tell time, or the passage of time. So I hope you've enjoyed that, guys. And does anybody have any questions for me? David's back. Do we have any questions?
We did have something in the chat there. Let's have a look. Let me try and find the chat. Paul, thanks for that, Paul, about the Welsh word for plough. Aredig, just for accuracy, aredig is to plough. So therefore, the structure itself is aradr. So you can see where the word aredig comes from. It comes from the word aradr. So thanks for that, Paul. That was great. Okay, I was
right,
just
sorry, I can see
Google.
Salias. Salias, my colleague Martin Griffiths has actually written a book on Celtic mythology and the night sky. It's called Dark Land, Dark Sky, and it's currently just being reprinted. What, David's got a copy at hand for me, and that tells us all about the Celtic mythology, which is then transferred into the night sky. Where are we going? You're right. Right, the most distant thing you can see with the naked eye, Martin, is the Andromeda Galaxy. Like I said, it's about 2.5 million light years away from us. Now, with telescopes, obviously, we can see quite a bit further. And with the James Webb telescope being launched, we should hopefully see back to just after oh, can't get my words out now. Just after, oh, I give up. I give up. I've been a long 2 days. I'll get back to you on that one. That's the one, Mark. It's not quite the Big Bang. It's recombination when we start to see the light coming through from the Big Bang. God, my brain's fried. Right, there's a couple of apps. So one I particularly like is actually the one I've been using now, which is called Celestron Sky Portal, and I'll just chuck that in there for you. It has lots of information on the night sky, but also the mythology and astrophysics behind it. There's a one for you, David, because I unfortunately don't speak the language, from Paul.
Yeah. It's Paris Trio would be a frying pan, and it reminds me of a nursery rhyme I was taught as a child, and I can try and remember it. Fioch i'r ioed yn morio, wel do, mewn padell ffrio. Fe chwythodd y gwynt i'r ail o man, a dyna lle bu mi'n crio. And roughly translated, it means, have I ever been sailing? And I said to this person, yes, I jumped inside a frying pan, and the wind blew me all the way to the Isle of Man. And that's where I was found crying. Thankfully, I came back.
I didn't realize you'd been there, David.
No, I haven't, but it's the nursery rhyme, isn't it? Yeah,
right, as I promised earlier on, guys, we've got a couple of pictures. Now, this, yeah, it's not really doing it justice, but I don't think. This is the Andromeda Galaxy, taken as a single image from Wales. So it's not bad at all. Obviously, there are better out there. We've taken them over multiple images and stacked them together, but this is just a single image of around about 90 seconds exposure time. So that's the Andromeda Galaxy, and you can see M110 and M32 here, and these are actually companions to the main galaxy. They're known as dwarf galaxies, and eventually these will be subsumed by the larger Andromeda Galaxy. We've also got the Rosette Nebula, and you can see the Rosette Nebula there. Now, I am not going to take credit for this one. It was actually my 12-year-old grandson who took this picture and actually put me to shame. As I said, we were trying to escape lockdown a little bit, so I took him out for an evening, give him free access to one of my telescopes, give him a camera and said, get on with it. And this is what he produced. And again, this is a single image, as he doesn't know how to do any kind of stacking. So, any more questions there? Right, well, there are a few favorite constellations from all over the shop, I'd imagine, but my particular favorite is the one called Delphinius. So Delphinius is the dolphin, and it's located just to the side of the Milky Way. I'm not sure, I just spelled that wrong, I think. But if we go back here, how can I share this again now? So if we go back to back to the Milky Way, when you see the Milky Way here, you see Aquila, you see Cygnus just above. Well, just in here, there's this tiny little group of stars. That is Delphinius, the dolphin. And when you look at it, you can see the kind of head and tail of the dolphin with a dorsal fin just coming off. It's actually quite a nice one, I think. And amongst the constellations, it's one that really does look like what it's supposed to be, whereas others is just made up, unfortunately. Any other questions there? Nope. Well, thank you very much for listening to me babble on for the last 45 minutes. Hope that was okay for you all. And I'm just going to hand you back to David, who I don't know was playing the piano, but I don't know what he's doing. So I'm going to hand you back to David for the end of it, and I shall hopefully see you again later on as we finish off the conference today.
Thank you, Paul, for your comments. Interesting, yes, definitely. And Alan knows his stuff. And if there's one person in the world that I'm happy to be corrected by, it's definitely the great man himself, Allan Trow. So thank you all for joining us, and please join us for the next session, which starts at 4:30 Greenwich Mean Time, and we will have Dr. John Barentine at 4:30, formerly of the International Dark Sky Association, and a great campaigner for dark skies and the campaigning element of reducing light pollution across our land, especially here in Wales, of course, which we have quite a few of our square kilometre ridge, pretty dark in Wales, with so many cities far away from the countryside. So the countryside itself is a really good place to go and visit safely and visit responsibly as well. So see you in the next session, everybody. It's been great having your company, your interest and your questions as well.